and it tells you where to line things up. You just basically just read through the instructions. It's pretty simple once you understand all the terminology, which is what I gave y'all the other paper for. And it'll tell you when to slip stitch stuff, whether or not they want you to do a blind hem stitch, which y'all know I'm all against those anyway. But you just follow through the pattern instructions and it will tell you what to do. Once you have done a few garments, you will be able to look at a pattern and decide for yourself how you want to put it together. Unless it's something weird, like a vest.
I was thinking that would be nice and easy.
Well, it is, except for a vest, you're not supposed to see any seams. So the way you have to do that is you construct it all, leave the armhole open, leave the armholes open, and pull it right side out, and then stitch inside the armholes until you get a hole about this big, which is about as far as you can get your machine to go around it, and then pull it out and whip stitch it. But even that is broken right down in the instructions. How to turn it, where to pull it through, to stitch up, what to leave. It'll tell you how big an opening to leave. And then to finish it, you know, you'll have to finish this by hand. Okay? It'll tell you where to put on embellishments, where to line them up. There will be notations on your pattern as to where to line them up. But your pattern really will explain it all. It's just occasionally you will run into a place where it just doesn't make any sense. Most likely, if you've hit that point, then they really have forgotten to tell you something. And if you're stuck bad enough, you'll have to ask someone who sews a lot to straighten it out. Or you can just look at it sometimes and go, how in the world am I going to get this together? Give it your best shot and go. Lots of times it works out. I mean, that's how I learned how to sew.
There's a seam ripper.
Yes, your seam ripper, everyone needs at least 2 or 3 of them. But you really do, because you'll use it a lot. Now, before we get to actually laying one out, I will go over a couple other things. When you're constructing your own things, sometimes you'll look at an outfit and you'll go, well, I like the body of that, but I really wish it had this sleeve. Or I really wish it had this collar. They're pretty much interchangeable.
Same size.
You can get the same size. There are a few things that will make it work easier for you. So like you like this dress, but it has a gathered sleeve, and you would rather have a pleated sleeve, which is what this dress has. Just take the sleeve out, cut it for the same size, and pin it on. If you need to adjust the pleats a little bit, because you might, because patterns are a little bit different, just make the pleat either a little looser or a little tighter to make up the difference in the size of the armhole. But if you started with a size 8 in this, and you got a size 8 sleeve here, it'll be close enough that you can just interchange that sleeve between the different dresses. The only time you cannot really interchange well is if you want a smooth sleeve, because then you have a lot of altering to do right in the middle of the seam to make it smooth. So if you want a smooth sleeve on an outfit, you best get a pattern with smooth sleeve.
Which is easier to do, smooth sleeves or gather?
Gather.
Oh.
Gathering is far more forgiving, because if you did anything wrong on the smooth one, it's going to pucker and it'll shut. So
Anna Green gave us puff sleeves.
Puckers and pleats are very forgiving, because if you cut something wrong, or you pinned it wrong, or you sewed something wrong, when it comes to the gathering, you can just make up the difference in the gather or in the pleat. So anything that is gathered or pleated is going to be more forgiving than something that has all straight seams, because when you're doing all straight seams, you really need to be dead on the money to make it all lay right. Okay? If you want to put a collar in a dress that doesn't have a collar in it, you can get a collar piece from another dress. Here again, try to get the proper size. I wish I had one that had a better collar than this, because this is actually only half collar, so it really wouldn't matter where you lined it up, as long as the point was right here in the middle where the two came together. But in another collar, if the neckline of that collar doesn't quite match up with the neckline of the piece you want to put in it, take your interfacing, trace the neckline on your pattern piece that you want of the dress you're making, and then lay on the piece to the collar you want and trace the outside. And that way you'll have a custom-made collar that will fit the dress you want it to fit. And anytime you need to adjust anything, unless it's just a completely straight skirt to like a jumper, because the skirt for this is just a plain rectangle, you can add length to that. And because it's a child's thing, it's not really curved much in the bodice, you can just add length to that. Just use your gauge and go down in certain spots and then connect the dots. Any other time, make your adjustments in the middle. And then draw your line up to make it meet. Because making an adjustment in the middle will make the top and bottom of it look right. Okay? So, you can custom make anything you want for any outfit, as long as you remember that the points you have to match up are the neckline, the sleeve, the armhole, but that is forgivable if it's a gathered or pleated sleeve, or your shoulder seams. Your shoulder seams the front and back have to meet 5/8 of an inch into it. As long as those meet, you can pretty much do what you want with the rest of the pattern. Okay? Now, some things you'll also want to know. You can look at some of these and see that they're made differently. The collar on this does not attach to a neckline. It actually attaches to both the bodice and the sleeve. And this one, the sleeve gets set in where the yoke and the dress come together. So it doesn't have an armhole per se until you get other parts of it together. Okay? So those I wouldn't interchange as much as I would, one of these. However,
is that easier than just like a regular sleeve? You think that kind of
it's not any harder. If I were to modify this nightgown at all, I'd just make it tank top style and just leave the sleeves off of it. This one, to be honest with you, I wouldn't change it all. It'd just be too much of a pain. But that's some of the things you can do with them. Now, what pattern piece did this come off of? Oh. This is the other thing you can do. I had to make this for someone who was in play once. So this might be something, You wouldn't have to make this adjustment, I don't think, for your son, but you might have to make a different adjustment. He was in a play and he needed a great big cape, except he was a great big guy. And it was pretty much a one-size-fits-all. It was supposed to fit anywhere from extra small to extra large. And he was at least as tall as your husband, and probably broader. So what I had to do was take it out, and you can see where I made notations on the pattern. It had to be longer. It had to be broader across his shoulders and upper back. So I just made notations for how much I needed to increase the size of the pattern to make it fit him. And just remember, your pattern piece is usually half because you're going to lay it on a fold. So when you take a measurement all the way across, like I did him, shoulder to shoulder, and sometimes, especially if you're fitting something through the shoulder like this, the only fitted point is in the shoulder. Have them flex, because something that will fit you when you're relaxed is sometimes tight when you go to do something like this. So I had him flex and then measured across the widest point. And then I think he was overall like 4.5 inches wider than the pattern piece. So I had to add 2 1/4 inches to the pattern, which would give you the overall 4.5. And remember taking your seam allowances too, so because your pattern piece may only be for that, but you got to remember some of that will be in the seam allowance. So you just need to remember that when you're making an adjustment. Now, as to laying up, before we get to laying up a piece, and I'll show you how to transfer all the information, I'm going to show you one more thing that women will run into sometimes. And I know none of us really wear these anymore, but occasionally you might you know, for a play or something, you know. Or there are actually some dresses that have a skirt that is made just like this, that attaches it. It comes down and usually has a short top that ends about empire waist, and then comes straight out like this with no gather. So your skirt will end up on that to be exactly the same as this. And it's ginormous. Yeah. Yeah, on these, I'll tell you, on anything that is done like this in a great big part, if it tells you to hem it up 1/4 inch or something like that, ignore them. Make that hem just as tiny as you can, because the more you roll something up that's shaped like this, the more you're going to run into little tucks and pleats all along the edge of the hem, because it's having to make that fabric. There's way more fabric at the bottom of this than there is 1/2 inch up. And so the tinier you can make a hem in something that's shaped like this, the easier your job will be.
You put this on the fold because it has those.
Put this on the fold.
Okay.
And turn this one upside down, given the way this is laid.
Oh.
If my fabric were laid the other way, I'd lay it the other way.
Upside down. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you can lay them upside down. Frequently you have to. Obviously, I would require fabric for this.
Sorry, I'm going to squeeze.
I'm sorry. If you cannot find fabric or whipped cream for something like this, then go on ahead and put a seam down the middle. Just unfold your fabric, cut the piece, just make sure you keep what would be the fold as a grain line, and then make a seam down it, because sometimes you can't find fabric wide enough. But this would require one of the 54-inch fabrics to do this one.
Which probably says on the pattern.
Probably does, somewhere on the back. But here again, it also depends on the size that you're making it. A smaller size will fit on this better. So sometimes you have to take that into mind. So
Sorry? When Shane was trying to do a layer when we were playing basketball, then he had to put it
Oh, yeah.
and then it
It's cute.
okay.